uh, concept of like a block of wood before the wood carver has carved a Buddha out of the block. But it's also, if I understand, how that the Zen acolyte would like to return to that state of being where one is like a block of wood before it has been carved. That, in other words, the innocence of the child, the uncomplicated aspect of life in the world. So you strive to get away, get through all the complications of desire and confusion and get back to the innocence of the child, which is a sort of, they consider a more pure state of being. So these are sculptures, yet they are, I try to make an interesting sculpture with a minimal intervention in the stone, letting the nature of the stone speak for itself, and with some intervention. So I like that title, Uncarved Block. This is double helix. It's not exactly the configuration that I ended up with, because I had taken it apart and made it one long single helix. But I wanted to show you, this is the original poster board model, and the piece was a Ohio Arts Council Present for Art project over at Wright State for their new DIGS Life Science Laboratory. These lines indicate where the piece was bent. It's one whole piece, and the two sections are just bent, because all these corners are welded. So the S indicates a single piece. So that way I could count how many single and double pieces I had. It's 8 feet high, 8 feet wide, and about 25 feet long. All sanded stainless steel, and each surface is a little different. Each one has a unique pattern to it. Since they had the theme of biosciences, and also next door was the mathematics building. That was part of it. So in order to incorporate the mathematics, I chose to work with the Platonic solid, the dodecahedron, which is made of 12 pentagons. So it was a little tricky to figure out how to get a double helix out of pentagons, but I managed, and I really like what I came up with. When I was installing it, here's a photograph by an artist over there. It's a little hard to read, but it's kind of an artistic photograph more than anything. But you see the different textures. As we were installing it in sections, one of the professors came out of DIGS and said, "Stop, stop, take it back. It turns in the wrong way." I have it going maybe right instead of left or something. But another professor told me that they turn both ways. It's not really critical. But that's not untypical of a response when a new work of art goes in a public place. But it was, we made it at Buddy Sheet Metal. They assembled all the parts, and sculptor Brian Mound and I ground all these welds and created all these surfaces. It was quite a project. I don't know if we can continue right here with this piece. This is Wind Dragon. It's 30 feet high, and it was made for the the Beijing Olympics in 2008. This is the original poster board maquette. The original title was Mercurius, because there's kind of a serpent running up through the center. So that was the original title, but for the Beijing Olympics I changed it to Wind Dragon. Wind because it's like a sail, and the dragon in China they like dragons, and you have the snake going up, so it's pretty dragon-like. So each of these panels is painted, and I had different number of different painting schemes. You see the one they chose. I had a different one that was really, really nice, and they sort of got parts of it, but they didn't do it quite the way it should have been done. But that's the way things get done over there. So this is Wind Dragon, and next to it is Nano Tower. Now I've done this, you can see, is probably related to Paradigm, the 100-foot piece from Australia, but it's somewhat different. And I call this, and coincidentally, it's similar to the structure of a nanotube. So that's why I title it that way. Now, this one is painted, and it's 30 feet high in Urumqi in Xinjiang, far west China, for a symposium by the Civic Center, in the Civic Center Park by the City Hall. And it is a tighter, smaller dimension. That would be number one. This is number two. I've got one that's a bigger diameter. And then this one is very similar to this, but I had put some circular holes and some square holes. I think they were square. And this one is in the Peace and Friendship Park in Ordos, which is in Inner Mongolia, part of China nowadays. It's also 30 feet, but it's all mirror polished stainless steel. They were both made at the same sculpture factory in Beijing, on the outskirts of Beijing, which is a huge factory, and they're totally devoted to making sculpture. And if we could slide over to the next piece, this one is called Paradigm Shift. It is related to Paradigm, but you see the shapes are 90-degree angles, 3, 4, 5 triangles, as opposed to being more another triangle. So it's 23 feet high and all mirror stainless steel. Actually, this stainless steel came from Morningstar. These are all the drops from making Morningstar for the World Expo piece. And if you remember, Paradigm had a vortex that turned one way all the way up. Whereas here, I had enough pieces to do the vortex this direction up to this point, and then I flipped them over and did the vortex the other direction. Well, actually, maybe this isn't the actual maquette. I think they're all going the same way. But on Paradigm Shift, the one that it's over at Sinclair Community College at the Moore Technology Center on East 5th Street, across the river from the campus. It's kind of the only Sinclair building over there by itself, but it's in front of the building, and it's all mirror stainless. But here, I think you can see it comes up, the spiral comes up to the left, and here it turns and spirals to the right. So this I must have made first and then switched it, because we are in the midst of a paradigm shift from the Cartesian worldview to the electronic holographic worldview. This tower is now gone. This whole power station is all bulldozed and gone. This is Sublime Portal. I originally carved it in white Italian marble when I was in Pietrasanta, Italy in '82. I had a fellowship, the Lusk Memorial Fellowship, administered by the IIE, which is Fulbright, to study bronze and stone in Italy. So this idea comes from the movement of plate tectonics. And I saw that I had a sculpture in that drawing of plate tectonics, and so I carved it out of a single block of marble there. And then that piece went to China and became this large-scale version over there. They carved it out of, I think, three big blocks of marble, or maybe 4, 5. But it's about 9 feet high, I think, 8 or 9 feet high. It really should be 12 feet. But this one, I had a piece of white granite that I got from Wisconsin. And so I carved this in one piece because I like the motif. It's from straight on, it's just a perfect circle, like a moon gate from Asian gardens, but you can still walk through it. So that's why it should be really big, so you can walk through. This is Eidolon elliptical sphere. This one's 20 feet high in Abu Dhabi. It was a symposium in 2010, I think. And this version I just did in Russia, Penza, outside of Penza, Russia, last year. It's at least 20 feet high, and it has two interior parts. The center one is circular. The second one is geometric, and of course this is sort of elliptical, geometrically elliptical. Here you see the stainless steel maquette of the elliptical version. And this is about 20 inches high. It could be actually very large. I'll bet you could probably pan over to this one. This is about 14 inches. This one's perfectly spherical. And I've done a number of versions, and I took one. It was to an exhibit in Taizhou, Fujian, or Xinjiang. No, Taizhou, I can't remember the province, in China. And it won a prize and went to a museum. And then they wanted to do it large, so they did it about 20 feet diameter. Now in the photograph, the gold is actually a gold metallized cloth wrapped around the structure. I don't know if they ever finished it, but it looked great that way. So I'd really like to do it even much larger. Potentially it could be very, very large. This actually comes out of a geometric piece of the same structure, but totally solid. And this is a motif that I like a lot, and it's very versatile. If you remember back to the beginning, the piece in Ireland, that piece shares the same structure, the architecture, as this one. It's just got solid panels that go out to triangles. And so it's a very versatile structure. And for me, it's dynamic because it wants to turn. The three shapes are moving around in a direction. So I think of it as a very dynamic piece. But it's also about the center. A lot of my sculptures are about center. This is one of my continuum pieces. Not continuum uncarved block, but just continuum. This one comes out of one that's just square with 4 lobes like this. But then I wanted to expand it, get some height. So originally I carved this out of white Italian marble in Carrara when I was there. And then a friend was working at some bronze foundry, so I took this sculpture over and we made a latex mold of it and cast a number of an edition of bronze versions of this sculpture. And I did the patina myself. Then I was at a symposium in Dubai in '04, I think it was, and so I carved this out of Oman limestone, or maybe it's dolomite, I'm not sure. And it's about 9 feet high there, and roughly 4 some feet square. There's a person, Li Sha, sitting inside from Hong Kong, and It was a lot of work, awful lot of work. And it's installed, I think, near the Burj Al Dubai, the world's tallest tower there. And we'll move over to this one. This I made a number of years ago in my studio, but the original model was a little bigger. But the idea is that you have two stones below and two floating above. And there's a geometric shape here. This is a truncated tetrahedron. Now, I proposed this for a symposium in Lithuania, one of the earliest I went to. And he wanted a big sculpture by an American, so I said maybe we could build it 12 feet high or something. So he liked that. And so we had my structural engineer here figured out what size anchor bolts to use and how thick the metal should be and so on. So there at the sculpture factory outside of Vilnius, we found these 4 big blocks, all roughly the same size and shape. So they each weigh about 10,000 pounds each. So there's 2 on the bottom, like this, and these 2 bolted to this shape, floating in space. So I call this piece cloud hands. Like in Tai Chi, you have a movement of the hands going like so, floating like a cloud. So that's why I call this cloud hands. The theme for the symposium was the center of Europe. Some French geographer put his compass down and made a circle around Europe, which included Russia and the Baltics and so on, and found that the center was pretty much just outside Vilnius. So that was their theme, the center of Europe. So this is the center of Europe, Europe being a man-made construct, and the nation states being natural geography floating around the center. So that was how I arrived at this piece. You see with the man next to it, that gives you the scale. If I stand under here, my head's about 6 inches from the top of the stone, bottom of the stone. So at least it's still there, hasn't moved. This is Cubo Obliquo. I made an earlier one, Cubo Obliquo 1, which is vertical. And it has the same kind of joining of the solid granite with the stainless steel parts. But I like Obliquo 2 because it's really dynamic. And I think this is at least a 60-degree angle. This is solid blue granite from Brazil. And it's about 30 inches high. But if you can see in this photograph, it's actually 30 feet high. It was commissioned for the Changjiang High-Tech Park in Pudong, which is across the river from Shanghai. It was made in a factory in Shanghai. I had the structural engineer worked out the design of the interior and so on, and we sent that over. And so they built an internal structure and then covered it with the stainless steel. And the granite actually is just sheet granite. It's not a solid block. It's not necessary to have a solid block up there. It requires more structure. So it's just sheet stone, so it's a lot lighter. But it's 30 feet high there at the headquarters. It was a fun project. This is Firewall. This is a shot of the actual installation. I won the competition to build a memorial to the firefighters and EMS personnel in this 9-county region. It's installed at the Stubbs Park in Centerville, beyond the police station and the library there in Centerville. It's down by the amphitheater. It's 15 feet high, and the triangular precinct is roughly 45 feet on a side, and it's got covered with brick, and in the inlay in the brick is the firefighter's symbol in black brick with a path leading up to it. So they have their memorial ceremonies. They walk down the path and have that inside here in the center. This is the original maquette. I was hoping to build it all in granite, but that was far too expensive. But it shows the basic concept. The basic concept remained the same. It's just that we built it in powder-coated steel instead. And in the center, I created a portal using the aluminum diamond plate like you see in the middle of a fire truck where all the water controls are. That here references the fire truck. And there's a number of symbols of firefighters and the Miami Valley firefighter symbol. And in the center of the diamond plate, which is about 7 feet high, we have a silhouette of a firefighter. I took a photograph of a Yellow Springs firefighter, and that was the model for cutting out the silhouette of the fallen firefighter, EMS person. And that silhouette, when we cut it out, we moved it behind the triangle about 12 feet. So that symbolizes the spirit of the fallen firefighter being in another dimension now that they have passed. The inspiration for the silhouette having the empty space of the firefighter came from a little bronze Jain icon, a Jain sect in India. And it's an icon of the Buddha. So you have the bronze, and the Buddha is really just a silhouette, empty space, because the spirit of the Buddha it's spiritual, it's immaterial. So you can only show that by having material around the silhouette. So I thought that would be appropriate for the fallen firefighters. So then on this wall we have certain information, and on this other wall we have information. But my idea was to create a precinct of fire. These are bonfires, abstract bonfires, and firefighters go inside the fire and fight the fire and rescue people inside the fire. So it seemed to me that since we were memorializing firefighters, that we should talk about or show the fire, not just a bunch of stones or whatever. This is the silhouette of the firefighter in the distance, and this is the silhouette of the fallen firefighters. These are hooks, like a fireman would use a hook, and the hammers. And this is the EMS symbol, Emergency Medical Service. This is my Grinnell Bridge piece. Years ago, 66 I think, or 5. Grinnell Bridge, I think it fell down in a big flood, or maybe they took it down. In any case, I was able to get a number of I-beams, salvage some I-beams from it. So I took them, I was at the Dayton Art Institute at the time, so I took them there, and we had an overhead crane. So I had made this model, I think based on the sizes and shapes or the amount of I-beams I had. Then I was able to use the overhead crane and create this large-scale sculpture using those I-beams. So it's about 15 feet at this height, and I later added the blue circle. And originally it was orange because of orange painted steel, and then now it's yellow. But it's at my studio. And we could probably transition right to this piece. The photograph is on the back wall, but this is Maine granite. I was at a symposium in Maine in 2011. This is my Continuum Uncarved Block series, sort of an amalgam of some of the other works. Again, I'm trying to create a sculpture using somewhat minimal intervention in the stone. I always choose a block that's an interesting block just by itself. It's got character to it, like this drill hole and just the shape of it, the textures, the color. It's got to be an interesting stone to start with. And with this series, the Continuum and Carved Block, I reveal the three-dimensional cross within the block. So this is the top pin, there's two side pins, and these side pins, and the bottom, of course. So the three-dimensional cross of three-dimensional sculpture is revealed within this block of stone. Then there's also, it reveals a cube, kind of a cube, a block within the stone by removing these. And so that's another aspect of the massa confusa inside the block of stone. So I've done a whole series of these because I find really neat blocks, and it's really fun to explore what each block can say using this motif. Like if you can pan back to that photograph of the pink